Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, man. The month of July is here. Things are hot. We did a really cool video last week. I think they're cool, talking about baits and techniques, what to have tied on. This week, it's the Optima sponsored Where to Start. And I've got, I think, 3 doozy lakes for you guys. You guys stay tuned. We're going to come at you with where to start in the month of July. Hopefully, one of these lakes is in your part of the country, or you can get some tips from it that'll help you on your local body of water. All right, as always, man, we give a battery away, and I'm pretty excited. I just like giving stuff away. It's a big thank you to Optima Batteries because they sponsor this, and man, these batteries aren't cheap. So I just want to give the battery away. I'm excited to do it. And how do we do it? Like, how do you win a battery? If you're watching this video right now, how could you win a battery next month? Simple. Leave me a comment. I go down through there. I try to read everybody's comments, and I randomly pick one. And you just send me your address or send me an email through my website, and then I mail you a battery certificate from the great folks at Optima Batteries. That's that simple. And so I randomly went down through there, and the guy that I picked, his caption caught my eye. I looked, he'd commented like 80-something times on my channel. Citified Redneck, buddy, you are winning a battery certificate. He said, here I am again, champ, with his fingers crossed. Tough go on Watts Bar. He obviously follows me very closely because I had not a very good tournament at Watts Bar. Just went on and said a bunch of nice stuff, man. So I appreciate it. It kind of picked me up a bunch. And man, you got a battery coming your way. Just send me an email on my website. I will get you a certificate. And thanks for being a follower. So let's get off into the 3 lakes this month. I don't know which one I want to start on. One of them's in Ohio, one of them's in Oklahoma, and one of them's in Louisiana. Let's start with the easy one. Let's start with Fort Gibson Lake in the great state of Oklahoma. I love this lake. This is an awesome, awesome lake. And it's a great lake. Part of picking a lake in July, you got to pick a lake you can catch some bass on. And Fort Gibson's definitely a lake. Things get tough in July, and Fort Gibson's a lake that you can catch bass on in July. A lot of times the fish don't get very deep on Fort Gibson. And if you've got a body of water that those fish get deep and then the water gets hot, then, we've talked a lot about on this channel here lately, some fish being shallow in July. This lake generally fishes shallow. And it just screams to me like where to start is up the river. And it's simple because I can go to a website, I can see how much water's coming down that Grand River, out of Grand Lake, out of Lake Hudson. And it really is going to tell me like what I need to do, if those fish are going to be active, going to be tight to cover, going to be suspended, where and what I need to do. But when I look at it right here, and you see like right here's Lake Hudson, the river comes down, then there's this low water dam. So that's really where Fort Gibson starts right there. I mean, there's been a bazillion tournaments won right there below that low water dam. If I was to look at that on Google Earth and just show you guys what that looks like, this is called the low water dam. And it just has water coming through a few spots. You can get a boat up there. There it's completely covered if you're looking at it. There it's not covered. I'm trying to see if I can find there's a low water shot. So the water's down right there. This is a high percentage deal. And, I guess I'm starting off telling you guys a spot that's kind of rough to get to, get you a trail up here through these deeper stretches. But, that'd be a spot you could just throw a finesse jig, a swim jig, a spinner bait. It's just a high percentage spot where you can catch some fish in the summer. Oxygen's being created. It's just contained. It's a small area. And that's going to go for anything up and down this river. Like if you were to keep coming down this river, any of these laydowns in these bends, the heads of these islands, the tails of these islands, those are going to be really good. But just focus on these laydowns, like anywhere you got laydowns down this river, the mouths of these creeks. these bridge pilings on 412 bridge is going to be really good. You know, do some idling around right in there. See if you can find you a pipeline or something else crossing the river. But man, one place to start on Fort Gibson is up this river on laydowns or the heads of those islands or below that tailwater, below that dam. Those are all going to be in an area and a pattern you can catch fish all day long. I'm going to give you a couple more things to think about on down the lake. So if we went all the way down the lake and we got down into the water, and you know, Fort Gibson is pretty flat once you get down here compared to a lot of other lakes, and it's got big bays. Pretty cool lake. I like it a lot. So, you know, it's always not a bad idea to start where a lot of tournaments go out of. You got to think month of June, lots of tournaments. You know, this Taylor's Ferry, lots of tournaments going out of. You know, this Rip Rap would be a great spot to start. You know, these boat docks just north of this boat ramp, you know, those are always going to hold fish. I love fishing boat docks in July. It's just one of those things. You know, one of the baits that I mentioned last week in the top 3 baits is specifically for boat docks. That'd be a bait I'd throw right down through here. But to give you something a little bit more off the beaten path, you know, the great thing about CMAP right here, when I look at CMAP, is it gives me house foundation. It gives me roads. It gives me bridges. So, you know, when they start pulling that water, I would look at, you know, I would look at some of this offshore stuff, like this deal right here, this big point that comes out. You know, it's not very deep on top of it. You know, it depends on the water level. You know, it's anywhere from 10 to 15 feet. It's got a road, it's got a foundation. I know there's going to be a bunch of brush piles. You know, if that's too deep, move in right here to this next one. You got a couple roads that cross it. There's going to be a bunch of brush on that point also. You know, this foundation right there in the back of that bay, you know, if you can find that by idling around with your Lowrance, that's going to be a spot that's going to hold fish. I also like some of this main lake points and corners out through here. You know, you got to think about wind being generated, current going down through the lake. These points right here are all going to hold fish. These foundations, these points, those roads would be all a spot that you could throw a topwater early in the morning. They're shallow enough for that. But then like a square bill crankbait, like a Carolina rig, a football jig, a stand-up worm, that's going to be all stuff you could use. Down here in this next bay, in this Mallard Bay, the same thing. There's some really good offshore humps, some roads, some isolated rock. You know, a lot of stuff happens on Fort Gibson on that isolated rock. And, you know, those 2 bays that I just told you right there are as good as they come on that lake. And that's the kind of stuff that I look for on a lake like that. All right, so that's Fort Gibson Lake. And I forgot to mention, man, I actually had quite a few people want me to talk about Fort Gibson Lake. So I didn't write those names down. This next lake, I had quite a few people. Caney Lake, you know, when I went down through there, one of them was Spencer Stapleton. I had a few others. Caney Lake's in Louisiana, and Caney Lake, just to relate it to other lakes across the part of the country, to relate it to your lake, it's kind of like a little mini Rayburn. It's a flatland reservoir with offshore structure, really clear, lots of grass, lots of brush piles. It's a cool lake. So I'm going to get it pulled up right here, both on my CMAP and on Google Earth. Just to look at this lake, guys, it's a cool lake. You got some deep water down at the dam. You got all kinds of long run out points. You got some big flats on it that hold lots of grass. You know, like this flat here holds lots of grass. This flat here holds lots of grass. All kinds of grass. This whole upper end is grass. I'm trying to relate it to a lake that this might be able to help you with. You got a pipeline coming across it. You got a road coming across it. This road right here actually is where I fished. I started when I had a tournament there early this spring. But, you know, to me, that road, it could be a spot in July. It's going to be shallow, but, you know, there's some deep holes in it that might work. But for me, the month of July, when I look at this lake, and I look at this big road, this big long point that comes out. It's the biggest, most prominent piece of structure in the whole lake. I'm going to start somewhere out there on that. I am going to find brush piles. I'm going to find, you know, little corners, little tips on that, you know, and find that brush pile on that. Find those 3 or 4 or 5 fish and then cast a big worm on them. I mean, to me, that's just like the best piece of cover on there for those deep fish. Now, if you're struggling getting those deep fish to bite, then I'm going to slide up here on this flat and I'm gonna fish shallow on that grass, especially early in the morning, late in the evening. Those shallow fish are gonna be the most active. They probably live up there all day, but they're gonna be the most active, you know, that far south, early in the morning, late in the evening, throwing topwater or buzzbait, swimming a jig, you know, something like that around that shallow grass. There's gonna be two different groups of fish. You're gonna have those offshore deep fish, you're gonna have those shallow fish, but to me, this point right here is going to be a spot that I would start. I do some idling on this old road bed. I know this sticks up. The contour lines on this map aren't quite correct right there. There's lots of structure where this road comes across. I think it's actually an old railroad that comes across that. Here's another one right here in the back of this creek down by the dam. Be another spot that I would idle across. You know, there's some brush. You got some points that stick out. Out off the tip of each one of these points, there's brush piles. You know, this channel swings up right here. That's going to be a spot that's got brush piles. I'm going to look for those offshore brush piles on this lake, and then get back, cast a big worm off of them, maybe cast a drop shot around them. You know, this is a clear lake, gets a lot of pressure. It's a tough lake to fish, but those are the areas that I'm going to start. So like, just to reiterate, just to like, number one place to start, like, is that point right there that runs way out into that lake. Find you some brush, find you something out there that you see fish on, and you know, it's just July. Those fish are going to be out offshore relating to shad. They may be suspended up. You know, another good point was that one right there. Doesn't show up super good. Let me look at it here on Google. Okay, so here's an actual photo from 1985 on Google Earth before this lake was ever built. And you can see some of the main structure. Now, the problem with this photo is I'm at 32,000 feet elevation. When I look here in the bottom right-hand corner, I can't zoom in like you can on newer photos, you know, 1990 photos, 2000 photos, you know, like you just can't zoom in. It gets all real blurry. But even at a zoomed out level, you kind of get a gist of what's in this lake. You know, you can see they excavated a lot of dirt down in here to build that dam. So there's going to be all kinds of structure that's not necessarily natural structure, you know, levees and ups and downs, you know, just because of how they would have excavated all that dirt to make that dam. But then like right here, here's that road that goes straight across it. Then you look right here, here's that secondary road that I said is really prominent. It looks like it had a pond right there on it, has a point. See that point right there? And this waypoint here is only going to get you close. It's 3214, 31, you know, you can just look at it yourself there in that bottom right-hand corner. But that is going to be a key piece of structure. When you come on up the lake, you can see that road that I fished right there. You can see another old road right there that's not on the map. You just see some really cool stuff before this lake was ever built. You can see this hump right here, that really shiny hump. See something else right there. You've got a couple humps right there as a creek bends up. A big hump right there that's not showing up on my map. So you got some neat stuff by looking at this Google Earth right there. And those would all be places that I think in July those fish would be like offshore deep fish. And like I said, if those fish aren't firing, you just pull up. Let me get a current photo right here. Pull up and fish some of these shallow grass beds. I'll just show you a few of them. I think there's a photo down through here that shows some of that shallow grass. Sure can't see that pipeline really good. That's that pipeline that we talked about going across that body of water. I thought there was a photo with some grass on it. There's really not showing me much. Anyway, there's just some good offshore grass on a few of those points that I pointed out. And I am for sure, you know, this one right here is one of the main ones right there that has a lot of offshore grass on it, as is this one right here, has a lot of offshore grass out off that point. That would be a great place to start if you didn't want to get out there deep or if you couldn't get any bites out there. So guys, that's Caney Creek Lake. I appreciate you sending that one in. The next lake is for you guys up north in Ohio. It is, let me find my notes. I went through and kind of studied this a little bit. Here it is. This lake right here, this was sent in by quite a few people too. Nick Viterio was one of them. It's Caesar's Creek Lake. Caesar's, like Caesar's Palace. Man, what a cool lake. I did a little research on my sea map, and I can't find any like contour lines of this lake. So you're gonna have to forgive me on that. You know, I did a little research online too, just to see if I was dealing with smallmouth, largemouth. They say there's, what I could find, there's a few smallmouth in it, but it's mainly a largemouth lake. It doesn't fluctuate very much at all. Looking through the Google Earth photos, you know, there's some pretty muddy water photos. But it looks for the most part a pretty clean lake. You know, for size comparison, to relate it to a lake that maybe is in your area, I think this lake's under 2,500 acres, you know, so it's not a giant lake. But when I look at it from the big picture right here, you got a big body of water right here to the east side, northeast side of it. And then you got a fairly big body of water, and then it necks down to the dam. Well, this neck down right here, the month of July, like if I was to have a tournament, this has lots of potential. Let me tell you why. You've got a pretty prominent boat ramp, I feel like. Like, looks like a parking lot, a marina. I don't know, it just looks like an area tournaments would go out of, but that's not what makes it stand out for me. What makes it stand out is how this neck down comes through, any wind blowing, any water. It's these bridge pilings, to me, I would have to be able to catch fish off these. If there was any kind of water clarity, even if it wasn't water, they'd be on the shallow bridge pilings. I mean, if there's bridge pilings right there underneath that bridge, I mean, I would just go straight out there and idle straight out there, and that would be like the #1 spot that I would look, just because to me it just looks very, very, very fishy. There's another boat ramp right there. So, you know, if there was tournaments, you're going to have lots of released fish in that area. They're going to gravitate towards that current that's wind generated between there. You know, this lake to me, you know, when I look at the spillway here and the dam, it's not a generation schedule type lake at all. It's just, they just let water out when water gets so high. They just try to keep it at a constant level. It's not like you're going to go there and see a generation schedule, so you would need wind-generated current going through there. That bridge is going to provide shade, good vertical cover. I really like it. It's kind of mid-lake too. So then, when looking at the big picture again, so I've never been to this lake, guys. A couple other interesting things really stand out to me. It's like a secondary dam. I don't know what that is. Huh. I'd be curious what this is, guys. It's like a big, round, riprap concrete dome. It's truly like a secondary dam, like they're trying to keep water from maybe going right through there in a really high water situation. You know, just to get more water coverage. That's what it is, because that water right there goes that direction. That's a secondary dam, and I believe that one is right there. That's kind of interesting. You don't see that very often in a lake. So they added those to add more water capacity to it. But okay, back to my big picture stuff. When I look at this, look how clean and clear this water is coming in back here. So I've got dirty wind-generated water, you know, just because I'm guessing this is a shallow flat. So this shallow flat's going to be good. Any laydowns I have up here where this water is dirty, you know, that could be something that I would definitely start on. Like this island, I don't ever pass up islands. Islands are just something that holds fish, especially, you know, in lakes like this that are fairly shallower and dirtier water. I just don't pass up islands very often. Through my career, there's always fish around islands one way or the other. But back to what drew my attention up here. See this cleaner water coming in? This tells me it has flow year-round. Tells me it's going to be cooler than, you know, it just should have flow. And man, July and towards the end of July, fish are looking for the best oxygen, looking for a little cooler water. Man, I sure would go up this creek right here, and I would flip every little laydown you possibly can. I'm guessing it gets lots of pressure. I see a boat ramp right there, so I'd downsize my bait. I'd throw like a small Pit Boss Junior, green pumpkin, dip to tails, chartreuse, 20-pound test. I'd throw, possibly flip a finesse worm or flip a general, something a little bit different than everybody else, a compact spinnerbait. But that looks really intriguing to me up that river, just because there is some flow. It's cleaner water, should be a little cooler. This big area of off-colored water captures my attention because I feel like with that wind kicking up a little bit, any of these main lake corners and points that it looks like you got lots of laydowns. I mean, to me, man, I sure would have to think I could catch some fish off those laydowns, in that color water. I just don't see how I couldn't. So which laydown you say? See, the water's really clear there in April, though. So maybe the lake's not always. So I got some dirty water coming in back here. And it looks like the wind blows on that thing. Oh, this thing makes a saddle. That's cool. Man, that'd be a great place to start in the morning, throwing you a jaywalker around the top of that. Just, man, see that ridge right there? That's going to funnel those shad up and over that ridge. I have caught them so many times in my career on places like that to start my day. I mean, that just looks really, really good to me right there. So the water is a little bit cleaner. So if we have that clean of water, you can just see some mud lines coming down. Let me look at one more photo here. Really clean. Man, that lake does not fluctuate. Doesn't really give me a good photo of, say, really low water or something like that. The most recent photo, the water's pretty dirty, so that's why I was liking all those laydowns. Now, if the water's clean like this, I'm going to have to back out a little bit. I'm going to go back to fishing maybe some more offshore stuff. If any of these points, looks like this point runs out right here, and I don't have a contour map of it, but that point looks like it runs out. We've talked about upward facing points. Now, we've determined this lake doesn't have a lot of current flowing through it, but that point faces out a long ways, and we've determined there's lots of wind. So I would sure have to think there'd be some fish on that point right there. I saw something else a second ago. Oh, it looks like a pipeline right here. Some sort of pipeline. I just would have to idle around off the end of that, see what's out there, see if there's a hump or rocks or something, to that pipeline that goes right there. It seems like I saw another one on this lake. Let's go down to this end and let's pick one more spot down here. Oh, right here. I marked it. I remember when I looked at this. This is another pipeline. There's a photo right here where the lake's low and you can actually see the riprap out in the water. That may be it right there. So this has to be a pipeline that goes across the lake. There's something right there that goes across. I'm not sure where or what it's coming from, but there's riprap right there. So it makes me think it may be a super old one or something, but I would look at that. That's just enough hidden. When you look at the big picture of that, that's not a big major point. It's kind of a secondary point. I like it also because it's in a neck down area. I'd have a brush pile there if I lived there right in that area. And then you got that riprap and a possible pipeline. You got something crossing right there, and there's a weird dock on that side that doesn't go to a house that lines up with it. So I'm not really sure what that is, but it's intriguing. I will leave it at that. It's an intriguing something or another. Man, there's a spot I'd go in the springtime. If I could get in that pond right there, it should be a good spot. This looks like a really good spawning creek, lots of shallow water. I would have to think there's going to be some fish out here on these points. I like this point here because it's kind of a flat, and again in another neck down. This looks like a good feeding point. It's just hidden enough. It's not, but it's flat. Like when you look at everything else down this bank, it's steep. This kind of protrudes out, but it's kind of almost a hidden point. That'd be another spot I would definitely look at, guys. That's just a quick overview of that lake. It was kind of hard to do that lake. I forgot who all mentioned that. Nick Vitero mentioned it. I had 3 or 4 other guys that it just kept popping up as I went down through the comments. And it looks like a cool lake. I don't have a good contour map of it, but that's a general overview of what I would start, or where I would start, and what I would look for. Man, I appreciate you guys sending in those comments on it. Don't forget to leave a comment this month. Just, man, I don't care what you say. You can say Happy 4th of July if you'd like to say Happy 4th of July. Leave me a comment, and that way you might have a chance to win the battery when I go to pick the battery winner in August, when we do this all over again of where to start in August, guys. I appreciate you guys following along, and we will see you next week.